How to determine the value of a property the correct way, right? This is one of the most important numbers that you can know how to analyze when you're looking at a potential flip property. It's what is the after repair value and also what's the rehab. So I'm going to give you guys a couple pointers on what we look out for when we're comping a property to make sure that we are getting the correct value, right? It's going to save you guys so much time to learn how to evaluate a property before you get one under contract and your lender gets an appraisal. So take these pointers and even maybe create yourself a checklist, so as you're practicing comping you'll get better and better at it. At the end of this video, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to jump on our MLS and I'm going to quickly comp a property and get the value in less than 5 minutes. Okay, so here's the things that I'm looking for when I'm comping a property. The first one is make sure it's a similar year build. Okay, so if your house that you're looking at potentially to flip was built in 1960, we'll try to find the properties in that area which were also built in the 1960s or 1970s. A little key is that most neighborhoods or subdivisions were developed at the same time. So if you have a 1960s house and you're looking for 3 or 4 comps and those are 1960s houses, well, you know that they're more than likely built by the same developer. And a lot of times they're going to have a similar floor plan, similar layout, very similar all around, so those are going to be fantastic comps. And when I talk about comps or comparables, really what you want to be doing is finding 3 or 4 max, right? You don't need to take 10, 15, 20. I'm looking for 3 or 4 of the very best sold comps, so I know what my house has the potential to sell for once it's fixed up, right? That's what we're looking for. We're looking for 3 or 4 houses which have been completely rehabbed, right? Investor grade rehabs. And I'm going to use those to say, well, once I put in $50,000, my house can be worth this one, and this one, and it's an average of $250. Okay, so we've got the year build. Also size. Size is one of the most crucial elements, because as you see when I comp this property, we're going to use the size average of those 3 or 4 comps to derive the value of our property. Okay, so we're going to take the square footage of ours and we're going to times it by the average of those 3 or 4 comps. The next one, this is a bit of a no-brainer, bed and baths, right? If I have a 2-bedroom property, it's going to be very difficult for me to argue that my value is high as that of a 4-bedroom property or even a 3-bedroom property, right? I might be able to get in there and say, well, my square footage is very similar to this 3 beds, so part of my rehab is to make sure that I add a 3rd bedroom. Now that's very possible, so you're going to have to get kind of granular with the details. If I've got a 1,400 square foot 2-1 and my comps are 1,400, but they're all 3-1s, very possible that at some point during the lifetime of that property, they made it into a 2-bedroom, that it wasn't originally developed as a 2-bedroom, and you could easily convert it back to a 3-bedroom. And that would give you the value of those 3s. So you have to do a little bit of detective work. The next one would be, is your property a brick house or a frame house? If I have a beautiful brick house, I'm not going to be using comps of a frame house. So that's very important. The exterior and what were the materials that were used to build the property. The next one would be the foundation. Right here in Houston, which is the market that I'm in, we have a lot of older homes on the east side of town which are pier and beam, right? And that's going to be hard to comp a pier and beam house to a slab house. So you're going to eliminate all the slab properties if you're looking at a pier. You're going to eliminate the pier and beam houses if you're looking at a slab property. Again, I'm just looking for like comps, right? Same as anything. If I'm a Dodge dealer, I can't compare the cost of my Dodge to a Porsche, right? So same thing applies here. After the foundation, also look at, what are the stories of the house? If I am using a 2-story property, or if I'm looking at offering on a 2-story property, I want to try to compare 2-story properties. Generally, 1-story properties move a little bit quicker. Then I'm also looking at layout in this 2-story property. Is my primary bathroom, is that downstairs or is it upstairs? So again, primaries are going to be a little bit more desirable if the primary is downstairs, so I'm going to be trying to comp that if possible. Sometimes you can't find those comps and you have to do a little bit of digging and a little bit of imagination. But what you're trying to do is turn yourself into the appraiser, because the appraiser, you know, although they're very well educated and they you know, spend a lot of time studying the best way to comp properties, they're doing exactly what you guys are doing when you're comping your own property. Basically, what you want to be doing is turning yourself into a mini appraiser and also a mini contractor, because that second most important number of the rehab, you're going to be doing it the same way as your contractor. You're going to be looking at the roof, the foundation, the HVAC, and you're going to be trying to get a round number. And really what this is going to do for you guys, like you might have a great realtor on your team and you might be saying, well, why do I need to learn how to comp a property if I can just shoot it over to my realtor and they can give you a value? It's going to come to a point where it's very valuable for you to be able to do things yourself, because then you can make a quick decision. You don't want to be relying on your realtor all the time, or you don't want to be relying on your contractor to know what you should offer on a potentially home run deal. You want to be able to evaluate these numbers and bam, there's your offer. This is my 70% offer, and you know, you're good to go. And then you can bring in your realtor to double check your numbers. Then you can bring your contractor to firm in your final bid. But you want to hone in on, you know, being a pro at getting those offers out. The next one would be, you know, does your house have a pool? If your house has a pool, of course it's going to be more valuable than a property that doesn't have a pool. Or if you're using all your comparables, you notice all 3 or 4 of those have pools and you don't, you have to take that into consideration, okay? Also, lot size, it's not going to get as important as the square footage of the home, but obviously you can't compare it if you're sitting on, you know, half an acre and then you're trying to use comps on a full acre. Well, that's not feasible, because if you know, if somebody else lists a property right as you're listing yours and theirs is on an acre, which one is going to be more desirable, right? The one that has more land. So now if your property was, you know, 7,800 and you're comparing an 8,200, I wouldn't get too finite in that. It's still very similar. I'm not going to average it out like I am square footage, but when there's a big variation in lot size, it definitely plays a factor. The next one would also be layout, and I did mention it, you know, with the bedrooms, but also just the way a property flows. Sometimes you'll get, let's say, a 2-story and the entrance of the property is right in the middle of the house. You have to walk up and it's a step-in layout where you choose to go downstairs or upstairs, and all your competition is, you know, it's right there on the ground level. So those are things you want to consider, how the property flows. At the end of the day, your customer is going to be a buyer, and any kind of little intricacies or something weird about that property, if you see it, your buyer's going to see it. And it's not always a problem, but what you want to do is just consider discounting the total value of that property, because you know that to get that property sold, you might have to sell it a little bit cheaper if you're not going to go in there and change all the layout and, you know, make it exactly like those comps. And one thing I would also like to do is check all the active properties in and around the one that I'm planning on listing, and just kind of get a vibe for, you know, what are they doing to the property? What are the level of finishes? Are they changing the layout? Are they converting the garage? The most important thing that I can tell you guys when you're flipping a house is just to use that data to your advantage and just mimic what is selling the best, okay? So if I have a property that's very neutral, it's got, you know, white granite, it's got basic cabinets, it's got, you know, just standard LVP, I'm not going to go in there and try to change the world. I'm going to go in there, I'm just going to plagiarize their flip, right? I'm just going to do exactly what they did because their property sold in a record amount of days. I don't need to go in there and add a ton of extra stuff because it's not going to translate to extra value. At the end of the day, this is a business. You're trying to maximize your revenue. And the only way you're going to maximize your revenue is by reducing the amount that you put into that property if you can avoid it, because you're not always going to get it if you go over the top. So the next one would be location. And by location, I mean you might have 2 properties in the same subdivision, but one of them is on a main road. So if your property that you're going to offer is on a main road and you're comparing to properties nestled back in this really nice subdivision, well, again, which one is going to be more desirable when a buyer comes to that house? Something that has cars whizzing by it at 80 miles an hour, or something that's nestled in that subdivision, which is a little bit more quiet, or it's on a cul-de-sac. So location can be important, even if it's within your geographical area when you're running those comps. And again, geographical area is important. You're not going to be going out miles and miles to try to prop up the value of your property. Again, you're looking for ones as close as possible. The biggest thing I would always say is don't ignore what's there in front of you. A lot of realtors will do this to try to fluff up the value, or the wholesalers. They might ignore one comp and use a different one. But you guys you want to be using the exact comps and the most recent amount of sales history and the smallest geographical area as possible. And don't ignore comps just because they don't work with your number. You got to use those. Another one would be school zones. A lot of buyers are very particular on what schools that their children go to. It can be a huge difference. Here in Houston, one side of a major road to the other side can be a different school zone. One of those might be in an area that has a waiting list that's so good, and the other is not as good. That plays a huge value and role. Plays a huge role in the value of the property. So you want to be narrowing it down to making sure that you're in that same school zone, right? So you don't want to make a mistake and realize that after you close, that why aren't people paying as much as they are on the other side of the street? Well, it's because on the other side of the street, they're trying to get in there to send their kids to a better school. One that we have here that not every market of you guys are watching might have is flood zones. That has a big factor when you're talking about your borrower's overall payment. If they're in a flood zone, they're going to have to carry flood insurance. Their lender is going to make them carry flood insurance, so it's going to be more expensive and less desirable than one that's outside of a flood zone. Some of these areas you guys might be in might have little intricacies like fault lines or just areas where you have to pay more insurance. It's always going to be less desirable than less insurance. And then lastly, just overall curb appeal. This is just a huge one. I always try not to get too involved in only the numbers, but also try to put myself in the mindset of a potential buyer. Curb appeal is huge. If I'm pulling up to that property and it's beautiful, it's a nice craftsman style or farmhouse style, and mine's this, super modern, just it's not as attractive. You always have to consider that. Now, obviously, you can get some of that with your rehab and improve the curb appeal, but some houses are just going to be uglier than other houses, and you just have to take that into consideration. So hopefully these points on, deriving the value of the property are helpful. And I'm going to jump on here right now, and I'm going to evaluate this property in less than 5 minutes. If you guys haven't been on my channel before, I'm Hard Money Joe. This is all we do, completely raw, unfiltered, no fluff content to help out existing investors who are flipping houses and new investors looking to get into it. I've been in real estate full-time since 2017, flipped a ton of houses, rentals. Now primarily I'm a lender. We lend our capital to other investors. And every single day I see investors bringing me bad deals. They got told a value from a realtor, they got told a value from a wholesaler, and it's so drastically off of what that property really would sell for. And they've lost all that time. They might have put earnest money up for that property until I can tell them or show them like, hey, this is why your house is not worth $250. Your house is worth more like $220. And that makes a huge difference when you're talking about cash out at closing. It makes a huge difference when you sell the property, what your total net is. So I would really get good guys at learning how to look at comparables of a property and determine the after repair value, and also learning how to determine a rehab, and your life is going to get so much easier. You're just making the correct offers, those 75% offers, and you're going to get yourself some awesome deals. Okay, guys, so I'm going to run this property quickly that a borrower sent to us. Now, I'm using the MLS. There's other, programs out there that you can use, PropWire, PropStream, Propelio. There's a ton that are not the MLS where you can still learn how to comp on them. And all the, the basics of what I'm doing here are the same across the board. You just need to learn whatever program that you're using and learn how to comp effectively. So I'm going to run this property a borrower sent us. They're looking for a loan on it. They believe that the value is around $270,000. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just check their numbers and see if their property really is worth $270,000. So the first thing I always want to do is I always like to pull up the tax roll, and you can find these in different ways. I am just going to use what we call Realist, which pulls it in from the county, but let me just show you how else you could do it, right? So this property is in Harris County. You can just type in your county and go to real property records. And I know different states have different, disclosures and how you do it. But I'm literally just going to the the district, and I am just looking for the property through this way. So you can also do it that way. So I'm going to put in the address here, 9931 Cottrell. I'm just going to look at the characteristics via the tax roll, right? That's going to be the most realistic way or the most accurate way to find the details of that property. So this property that he sent me is a 3 1.5. So this is a full bath and this is a half bath. It was built in 1955. It's zoned to single family, and the property itself is 1,463 square feet. Okay, you can look down here. There's the tax value and some of the characteristics. Exterior brick, remember we mentioned that before. Foundation slab, we mentioned that. This has a garage, so we'll need to see if that plays a factor. Just kind of knowing this area, a lot of investors are converting the garage in this area, so that would probably give us an extra right here, 369 feet. So the existing square footage is 1,463, and if we expanded the garage, that would give us 369 square feet. So that'd be 1,832 square feet. But I don't want to use comps that still have the garage. I would have to look for comps which have also been converted, right? Because a garage, which I probably should have mentioned previously, is another factor when comping. Another one is HOA. I remember I forgot to do the HOA. So if your property does not have an HOA compared to properties that do have a homeowners association. Okay, so I'm just going to see if I can find these 3 or 4 properties which are similar. So I'm going to take my address here. And actually, let me do this, guys. This is one thing that I think is good to get into a habit of. It covers that what we mentioned on curb appeal. So I'm just going to pull up Google Maps, and then I'm just going to look at my property, right? Very basic property, kind of ranch style. Nothing out of the norm from it. It looks like a very normal subdivision. Probably most of these properties were built by the same developer. Most of them are going to be, similar curb appeal and similar looking. So we're good there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in here. What I want to do is, this is one thing I like to do. I like to check out the actives and the option pendings, and the pendings, just to really see what I'm competing with. Although I'm not using those actives as a direct comp, I know that if I listed my house in 3 weeks and these are still actives, these are my competitors. These are what other buyers are looking at because they want to be in this area, right? So I only have 2 sold comps. I'm going to go a touch further back and a touch further out, not ignoring these comps, but I want to see if anything pops up closer to that 1,800 square feet that we know that we can be part of, right? So let me move this to 200 days. Let me move my radius out to half a mile. And do I have more? Yep, I've got quite a few more. I've got one at 1,700, one at 2,100. And then what I want to do is take a look at the map and see how I'm using all of these over here. Well, all of these ones kind of south of this main road here, north of this main road, and east of this freeway, really I can use those. I'm also going to check to make sure they're in the same school zone, and I'm going to check to make sure they're in the same flood zone. So let me siphon these out, and then I'm going to check so Pasadena High School, Garfield. Yep. So basically these zones here with these blocks it shows you, and they're actually in the same school zone. So these are your boundaries for us on the MLS that I'm using. So we're okay there. And then what I want to do is check the flood zone. So I'm going to come here. Now this one does zigzag here and there. So let me put in our property. Okay, so this is what we call flood zone X. It means it's not in a flood zone. And just kind of a little pointer, I can use everything that's in the 500-year flood zone here because mine's going to be more desirable. Now, if I was in the 500, it would be harder to use the X because these would be more desirable. But you can always use the lesser of the desirability, right? So if I was a 3.2 and my best comp was a 3.1, I can use it. But if my best comp was a 4.2, I can't use it, right? Because that is more desirable than mine. But if it's less, then I'm okay to use it. So now I'm going to come to my results and see, what is active. So there is some that have been sitting here for quite a long time. This little column here for us is days on market, and that's a huge data point for me. My favorite data point when running comps is the days on market, right? How fast did that property take to sell, or how long has it been sitting there? So here's one even right on the same street, okay? 1,300 square feet. It's listed at $269. It is smaller than mine. So why is this one not selling? It's not selling. The curb appeal doesn't look very good. They didn't do landscaping. And it's not a bad house, but look at the state of the pictures the agent did. You can tell that it's been lived in. It's not in bad shape, but it's not fantastic. Probably when you get up close and personal too, you'll see some issues with the property. That generally the way that it happens with pictures. You can even see kind of like the grout lines are a little bit dirtier. You can kind of see that the floors are a little bit weathered. So yeah, this house is not in bad shape, but it's obviously been lived in. Okay, any others that I'm competing with? Any 1800s? Here's one, 228. It's been sitting for a while. Again, you can kind of tell that the pictures are a little deceiving, even just looking down at this LVP bubbling and the flooring. This door is a little bit older, so it still needs some work. Right, original granite in here. You can tell this property need to come in and do a rehab. So I'm not going to use that as a comparable. So let me just come back here now. I'm not going to go through every single active one to see what we're competing with, just for the sake of this. The only ones I can really use are the sold comps. So let's take the sold comps, and then what I want to do is I want to pull out the top 4 or 5 highest selling. Okay. So really we have 3. See how there's a big jump here? I'm going to take these 3. Now these are 3.2s, and that's a 3.1. Ours is 3.1.5. So our best comp here, price per square foot, is a 3.1.5. I might get in there and look at making this a full 2-bedroom, and then I can definitely use these 2. So that would just need to be factored into your rehab. Remember, we're looking for 270 here. So are these investor grade rehabs? And generally they are if they're your 3 best. So you see this one. It's in really good shape. They've obviously opened up the walls, made a more open plan. They've done a decent job on this one. New appliances, new fixtures, new doors. That's kind of what the investor should be shooting for. Everything's pretty neutral. Let's take a look at this next one. Is this also investor grade? You can kind of see the curb appeal of these properties are all very similar. So again, new flooring, new paint, new fixtures, obviously, bathroom quartz, very similar to the last one. These white prefab cabinets, the quartz, the black hardware. Again, very similar to that last one. You can kind of start seeing a trend of what they're doing there to make them sell good. And then this one here. This one's actually, less rehabbed. They left that tile in there. The cabinets are in good shape, but they're a little bit more, they're brown. This floor is a little bit, has something on it. But altogether, pretty clean. I definitely like those last 2 ones best. But I can use it, so I've got these 3 here. I'm just going to average this square footage. Now, he is shooting for 270, so what I'm assuming is, that he is planning on converting that garage. And did we see if these had a garage? So this one does not have a garage. This one does have a garage. And this one also has a 1-car garage. So those 2 best comps do have a garage. So what would it be if we added these 3 square footages together? So 183, 52, we've got 188 and 50, and we've got 194 and 79 divided by 3 gives me 188.93. And double check, you can just kind of look here at the price per square footage. Is it pretty much in line with these three? It is. So now I'm going to take my square footage of my house, which is 1463, and that gives me 276,000. The only thing I would say on this one to be a little bit careful for is that would be topping out the value, right? And kind of the biggest house on the block syndrome. I can definitely see where he's pulling his value. This 245 is the max, but let's see if we can find anything quickly that would bump it above that 240. So I'm just going to go back to my quick single family. I'm going to put the subdivision in, which is Sun Valley. And I'm just going to make sure, I can even go historically, and just make sure that anything is sold above that 245. Okay, so there's plenty here. Let's take a look. Let's do square footage. Let's do 1,500 and below. And here we go. There's plenty right here. So 259, 253. So yes, 264. So I can really see where he's getting his value. The average cost per square foot actually put him closer to 275. But because there's not any houses his size sold within, the last 60 days, I can see why he's putting it down to 270. I like the fact that he was pretty sharp and did pretty well on evaluating this deal.